It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
On March 31st of this year, really not that long ago, what is that, 6 weeks ago, give or take, Mr. Producer? I had Brad Smith on Life, Liberty, and Levin. And, you know, I do these long-form interviews, and we talked about the allegations and the charges against President Trump, and we talked about federal law. And he made it abundantly clear that this non-disclosure agreement did not violate federal law, that is, federal election law. He's a former chairman of the FEC. It's probably due to that interview, because this judge knows what he's going to say, that this judge determined that Bradley Smith is not going to testify as an expert witness on behalf of Trump. I have never seen one abomination after another like this. I have never seen anything like this. Seriously, folks. This judge is barely knowledgeable about the law in the state of New York, let alone federal campaign law, which can be very complex. Apparently, he's doing everything he can to undermine Robert Costello's testimony today, so Costello can't tell the story of what took place as the prosecution keeps objecting, and interrupting. The judge should have put an end to that, but he didn't. This guy is so in the tank. He's like a mob judge. Except I don't want to really libel the mob. The guy's a punk. And so we went back and we found part of the audio of the March 31 interview with Bradley Smith, the first segment. I have the full text here. Honestly, we shared this with everybody at Fox as well to remind them that we know what Bradley Smith's going to say. Rather than speculate, rather than lawyers talking to lawyers, lawyers talking to non-lawyers, non-lawyers talking to non-lawyers about what he might say, and so he said it. He said it. Right there. For millions to hear, and millions did hear. So let's begin with this, with Bradley Smith, the former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, not only an expert on federal election law, but he still teaches it today as a professor. Cut 29, go.
The Alvin Bragg case rests on an effort to federalize state law to turn a misdemeanor, if there is one, into a felony based on a bizarre interpretation of a violation of our federal finance laws, federal campaign laws, one that was already tried, but interestingly enough, by Jack Smith with John Edwards and fell flat. Do you want to explain to the American people the core of what Alvin Bragg's attempt is with respect to federal election law?
Sure. So to upgrade what would be a very routine misdemeanor in New York to a felony, the DA has to show that this misreporting, as he alleges, was done in order to conceal a crime. The crime he says that was being concealed was a violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act. And what he says that was that by paying money to Stormy Daniels for her silence, that amounted to a campaign expenditure and therefore was not properly reported under federal law, and that jacks the whole state claim up to a felony. Now, the problem with that is that federal law does not say that anything that you think might help you win an election is a campaign expense. Rather, it's an objective test in which things like polling, paying for staff, paying for headquarters, paying for advertisements and so on, those are campaign expenses. And the law, in fact, specifically prohibits someone from using campaign expenses or making campaign expenses for personal use. That is, to pay, things that might help you, like good-looking clothes or plastic surgery or a good-looking haircut or a nice relaxing vacation so you're fresh on the trail, country club memberships you can entertain, or settling nuisance business suits so that they're not an issue in the campaign. Those are all viewed as personal expenses, and they're not something you can pay with campaign expenses. So I think that's the problem that the DA have. He's trying to allege that these campaign expenses, these payments to Stormy Daniels were campaign expenses. And I think quite clearly they exist from an obligation independent of Mr. Trump's campaign for president. You mentioned the Edwards case. We'll go back to Edwards. This was tried, a similar case with John Edwards. People remember him, ran for president back in the early 2000s. Edwards had supporters who spent money to support and keep quiet a mistress whom he had gotten pregnant. And that went to trial. The jury ended up either hung or acquitting Edwards on a number of counts that was, finding that was not an offense under federal campaign finance law.
And live now, this is what the judge does not want the jury to hear. The judge is conspiring with the prosecution to keep the ambiguity of some federal offense sort of hanging over the trial as a dark cloud. And he doesn't want it defined because if it's defined, it becomes clear it's inapplicable. There's nothing there. And, of course, if you don't have the federal offense, which requires intent, by the way, then you don't resuscitate the state law, which has expired, let alone increase it from a misdemeanor to a felony. Now, we're unable to find the remaining part of the interview, so I want to read this to you. So I go on, but the theory is the same theory, which is that if anything is done that may positively impact your campaign as opposed to negatively impacting your campaign, and let's say it's an illegal, unreported corporate contribution, or in the case of Edwards, just an illegal contribution. And this is why people are saying that this is a preposterous case. It's sort of a maze they have to go through and follow. It's why the U.S. Attorney's Office wanted nothing to do with it. It's why the prior district attorney wanted nothing to do with it. Bragg dusts it off and he says, no, even though I'm a local DA, I'm going to pass judgment on federal campaign laws, which he has no jurisdiction to do. I'm going to assert that this non-disclosure agreement that was provided, but it is in the wrong category as a legal expense, or maybe it should have been a business expense. And I'm going to assert all of that was done in violation of federal campaign law in order to create a positive campaign image. Is that about right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm playing this so you know why the judge does not want Bradley Smith, his testimony, and also to point out one other thing. You watch me on Fox, you listen to me on radio and on Blaze, because we're way, way, way ahead of the curve on this stuff. And Bradley Smith answers, yeah. I mean, that's his theory. He says, and by the way, Mark, also, the Federal Election Commission chose not to act on this. That is, on the Trump issue. And they, under the statute, are supposed to be the primary interpreter of federal campaign law. And here's the thing about this, is that had Trump used campaign expenses to pay off Stormy Daniels and file this as a report, you can pretty much bet your house that people on the left would be coming after him for misappropriating campaign funds to pay personal expenses. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the non-disclosure agreement was a personal expense. It wasn't an expense for the campaign. It wasn't a campaign expense. And that's how the FEC considered it. A personal expense categorized as a legal expense by the corporation, all perfectly legal, nothing triggering federal campaign laws, period. And he went on, did Brad Smith. And in fact, even now, people on the left in the last week or so have released a spate of columns and commentary arguing that Trump cannot use campaign funds to pay his judgment against him. In another, I think, kind of preposterous suit. And that's this alleged civil fraud suit with $450 million judgment or whatever it was. So you have a sense that they were going to get him coming or going. If he paid for it, that is the non-disclosure agreement, with campaign money, they would say it was personal use. That is misuse of campaign funds, a felony. If he doesn't pay for it with campaign money, they want to say, hey, you didn't properly pay for it with campaign money and report it as a campaign expense. And you can't have it both ways. And he says, and I think the DA's theory ultimately is going to crash. He may even win a trial there in New York and everything, but eventually I don't see it standing. But in the case of John Edwards, It was even more direct, even though it wasn't a violation of law. That is, donors did raise the money and provided to protect Edwards from the negative publicity. And in that case, and in this case, rather, in Trump, we have a state law, a reporting issue that I would argue isn't even a misdemeanor. And then you have the DA going into federal law where he has no jurisdiction. You just said the FEC that oversees it says no violation. The U.S. attorney doesn't want anything to do with the prior DA. And he's twisting the law. He's twisting it to try and apply it to Trump. So it's even, in my view, worse than the John Edwards case. Brad Smith. Well, I think it is. And it's worse. And in another way, which is in the Edwards case, it's entirely clear that they were paying his supporters. They were paying this woman in order to protect the political viability of Edwards. Whereas in the case of Donald Trump, well, that was probably a consideration, or at least may have been a consideration. He also had a number of other considerations to protect himself, his wife, his children, commercial interests, and so on. So, yeah, I just don't think that there's any real basis for alleging that this is a campaign expenditure. I always put it to people, when you contribute money to a campaign, is this what you expected to be spent on? And the answer is no. This was a personal expense. Now, by the way, personally means corporate, too. By personally means it's not a campaign expense. We're with Bradley Smith, Capital University law professor, former chairman of the Federal Election Commission. He founded the Institute for Free Speech, I say. Non-disclosure agreements. HR departments enter into those all the time, every day. Media corporations that are calling this hush money. I noticed NBC has entered into non-disclosure agreements. Most non-disclosure agreements are secret, so we didn't even know. They entered into my CNETs entered into them. All kinds of people have entered into them. So, and by the way, members of Congress, as my wife reminded me, in 2017 entered into a whole ton of them. So is it the effort here by the media and others, the Biden campaign, to try and turn this into some kind of a treacherous, evil event? He's trying to cover it up with hush money, and then he uses corporate money, and then he uses it in violation of federal campaign laws. Isn't this all bogus? Bradley Smith, the probably number one expert in America on the federal campaign law, responds, yes. There's a lot of smoke. And as you point out, Mark, hush money is just a pejorative term. You can call lots of settlements hush money, or you could call them settlements and non-disclosure agreements, and usually they're called the latter. And in this particular case, for example, I draw the comparison. They're businessmen. Like Trump will always have a lot of lawsuits going against his various businesses, and he may, in particular point, tell his local counsel, say, look, I want you to settle this lawsuit. The guy says, no, it's a good case. He says, now just sell it because I don't want it distracting my campaign. He's doing it to help his political campaign. That doesn't make it a campaign contribution. He couldn't expense it on his campaign funds to pay off that settlement. And with a non-disclosure agreement, and that's, again, the problem that the DA has here, as you said, it's a lot of rhetoric, it's a lot of smoke. But if you really start boring into it, you start asking people, okay, where's the illegal violation? That is, it becomes pretty flimsy. This case is also weird in another way. I said the U.S. Attorney said, I'm not going to get into all that. It's too long. I hope this helps explain things. There's personal, or what's better to say, non-campaign expenditures and campaign expenditures. If the Trump organization, his lawyers, his accountants, Trump, he'd pay this out of the campaign, it would be a federal offense. An illegal corporate contribution that wasn't reported. But they didn't. They put it down as a legal expense on their business ledgers for the whole world to see. They didn't conceal anything. As a non-disclosure agreement. There is no federal campaign law issue. That's why this Judge Merchan does not want Bradley Smith, Professor Smith, former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, testifying. Because he would shoot a big torpedo in the side of this case and once for all sink it. And I encourage my brothers and sisters at Fox, play it so your audience understands it.
Mark Levin.
making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Mr. Producer, I haven't seen so many lawyers on TV since Perry Mason. Have you? Well, we got defense lawyers, we got former federal prosecutors, we got former judges, all the channels. I mean, I'm losing track. Some of them I never even heard of before. And I'm guessing the public's getting sick and tired of this case because they know it's a complete farce. They know it's a sham. They know it's a Democrat setup. They know the judge is corrupt. They know the prosecutor is corrupt. People are hoping for a hung jury. I am, for sure. Maybe better, who knows? But also prepared for the worst, just in case. Everybody knows what's going on here. It is a Stalinist show trial. That's exactly what it is. A star chamber is what we used to call it. Rules of evidence are being ignored and trounced. The jury instructions, while everybody's commenting on them, we actually don't have them yet. I suspect he'll give a little to the defense, but in the end, it'll be the wrong kind of jury instructions. I don't know how many lawyers you need to explain this. I really don't. But I just explained it in, 30 seconds, Mr. Producer? Now, as far as Brad Smith goes, 90% of what Brad Smith was going to testify to, he's explained on this program on several occasions. He explained on my Fox show in 2018, 2023, and 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. He's explained in writing. And this is exactly why the judge didn't want him to testify, because he was going to say, in no way in hell is this a crime. And that would have put an end to the whole thing, or as I've said, fired a killer torpedo right into the side of the case. And I've also pointed out that the prosecutor here has committed crimes. He has suborned perjury and you have Brady violations. And it takes, believe it or not, in the legal community, guts to say those things. Some have whispered it. Most won't go there. I go there. I go there because I know what we're up against. I know what we're up against. And in any event, I also know that it needs to be fixed. Otherwise, this will continue. We're going to have Julie Kelly on in the second hour. This morning, she put out a piece that the FBI authorized the use of deadly force during the Mar-a-Lago raid. And we know this because documents were released at the direction of Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida, who appears to me to be a decent, very good judge. And that requires some extensive discussion. We're going to have it with Julie Kelly in the second hour. We're going to go into this. It's not something to blow off. This has not been discussed yet on cable TV, and it needs to be discussed. So we will light a fire under this, and we will listen to the phalanx of lawyers, defense lawyers, former federal prosecutors, former judges, former defense lawyers, maybe former defendants, former plaintiffs. I don't know. We'll get there. But it's very important that we do, and I will talk further about what Brad Smith had said and what he put in posts today as well. ABC News has very strange coverage of what took place in Florida, the release of the documents. On the one hand, they trashed the judge, the last paragraph, by innuendo from the grifters on MSLSD and the Constipated News Network. This judge has been controversial. No, she's not. And then Jack Smith, they missed the point, and I'll get into this. Jack Smith said there could have been other opportunities for obstruction when, in fact, there was an effort to put classified documents back into the secure area, which is why Trump and the others were not charged with additional charges of obstruction, because they were actually trying to do the right thing. But that's missed by ABC News because basically they are partisan hacks and low IQ on top of the rest. At the bottom of the hour, we have a full damn show, boy. But we worked all day on this. That's what we do. We're going to have an exclusive interview with Ron Dermer. Ron Dermer is a member of the War Cabinet. He's probably the closest confidant that Prime Minister Netanyahu has. And he is involved in providing formerly national security advice to the prime minister and to the cabinet. He will be coming on the program at the bottom of the hour. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, have you watched the Biden propaganda networks? The word Reich, like Third Reich, or Reich, appeared in a video, you see. A split second that the Trump campaign or PAC put out. And everybody said, including George Stephanopoulos, there he goes, Hitler, Trump. He's saying we need a united Third Reich. We need it. And that was put out first by the Biden campaign, regurgitated by all the media, because that's how it works. But that's not what happened. As our friend at Right Scoop, Brian, points out, the media and Joe Biden went nuts today over a video Trump posted to his Truth Social account, calling it Nazi imagery and more. Biden headquarters put out this statement, and of course Stephanopoulos, CNN, the rest. Speaking of the Third Reich, they put their boots on and they marched in order and they clicked their heels and they goose-stepped all the way behind them. They put out this, Trump posts a new ad foreshadowing a second Trump term that says he will create a, quote, unified Reich, unquote, echoing Nazi Germany. Oh, so this is how Joe Biden hopes to get elected. Joe Biden, who is a fascist. Guess what? As Right Scoop says, they're wrong again. He says, I know it's hard to believe, but as it turns out, they're wrong. And of all websites that pointed this out, and I must give them credit, 1 out of 1,000 times, mediocre-ite. They picked up on this. They said, wait a minute, that's not exactly right. Other parts of the ad featured placeholder text about the European great powers and the digging of trenches next to headlines such as borders closed, 15 million illegal aliens deported, and peace through strength. The placeholder text about, quote, the creation of a unified Reich, unquote, also appeared at the end of the ad underneath the slogan MAGA. So we're at the very, very bottom. While the ad caused an uproar on social media, with President Joe Biden's campaign accusing Trump of echoing Nazi Germany. This is from Media. The controversial text appeared to be leftover placeholder text from a video editing template for Adobe After Effects. That's the name of it, Adobe After Effects. The, quote, newspaper vintage history headlines, unquote, template, which is available to download as part of a subscription service online, includes the same placeholder text, ready, about World War I, which was spotted in Trump's ad. Nothing to do with the Third Reich. And they didn't even put it there purposely. While many are aware of the term Reich in the context, writes Media, of the Nazi Third Reich, the term was also used by the German Empire, the Second Reich, from 1871 until the end of World War I in 1918. So they didn't make the ad. The ad uses a standard Adobe template, and the line wasn't even about the Third Reich, the Nazis, and it probably wasn't even supposed to be in there. But guess who that didn't stop, writes Right Scoop. Just doesn't matter if it's true. It only matters if they want to say it's true. Even when you're right, they find a way to still say you're wrong and evil. I even got emails today from family and friends. Look at this. You always have to step back. You need to be extremely cautious. Do not follow the propagandists, the Hamas propagandists, the Hitler Youth propagandists, the Marxist propagandists. Do not follow them, ever. On the other side, you have Anthony Blinken and Biden. You have our UN deputy representative. You have them all putting out condolences that the president of Iran and his sidekick, the foreign minister, died in a helicopter crash. Putting out condolences, officially, the United States government. This guy was called the Butcher of Tehran when the revolution occurred, quote unquote. He was responsible for overseeing The slaughter, the estimate is 15,000 people. Most people think more. The most vicious, vile overseer of murder, rape, torture. And we put out our condolences. Building nuclear missiles aimed at our cities. Funding the terrorist organizations all around the world. But our friend Matt Lee, Mr. Producer, at AP, been around a long time, he would have none of it. So he questions the State Department mouthpiece. Hat tip, right scoop, cut one, go.
Then can I just ask you about the state? What exactly is official condolences?
It's condolences on behalf of the United States government.
Well, then why doesn't it say that? This is like official condolences means absolutely nothing, and I'm not even sure why you're offering condolences if this guy was as bad as you say he was.
Look,
why? I mean,
because we regret any loss of life. We don't want to see people die in helicopter crashes. It doesn't change our view of him, our view of the regime.
There
but
is
I'll say,
one person that you can think of that the United States didn't want to see in an air accident.
There were people on board that aircraft who have families. We thought that's an appropriate step to take. It's the step the United States government has taken when any number of foreign leaders with whom we had vehement disagreements have died. But we also made clear in that statement that we continue to support the Iranian people in their fundamental struggle for freedom.
Really, well, I would just point out to you that when one of the former presidents of Cuba died, this would be Fidel Castro, one of your predecessors, did not offer any condolences. And basically said good riddance.
So I will.
And if you really think that Raisi was as bad as what you have laid out at the beginning, I'm just a little bit curious as to why you would put a statement out, no matter how short it is, but with the line official condolences in it. I don't get it.
As long as we're addressing the historical record, the United States offered condolences when Hugo Chavez died, when Joseph Stalin died, people with whom we had great disagreements.
Wow, you're in great company there, pal. Really good. Go ahead.
An ally of the United States all through, and we talked about this earlier, all through World War II.
He did not die during World War II. He died afterwards when our disagreements with him were quite clear and quite plain and quite well articulated by the United States government. It is a step that the United States takes, recognizing that people have families, and in no way at all undermining our fundamental view of the Iranian regime and its crimes against its own people and our support for the Iranian people.
So the Biden administration gives official condolences to a mass murderer who's also involved in and responsible for the mass murder of Jews in Israel. But the mass murder of people in Yemen, the mass murder of people in Syria, the mass murder of people in the Gaza Strip, and the mass murder of his own people. Because other people were on the plane. That's not what they said. We gave condolences to the family. They said condolences to the butcher of Tehran. And they go after Donald Trump because the word Reich is in a video that even Mediaite says, wait a minute, he's not endorsing the Third Reich. And they go through the technology and how that actually happened and appeared, but the media didn't stop there, did they? No. Now, Mr. Producer, I don't have it in front of me, but I want to quickly move to the questioning of Blinken. In front of, where do we have that here? I have it here somewhere. We've got 1 minute. Let's go to cut 2. Go.
I'm telling you.
Yesterday the State Department issued a statement mourning the death of the Iranian president. Now, I assume as Secretary you share that sentiment?
We expressed official condolences, as we've done when countries, adversaries, enemies or not, have lost leaders. It changes nothing about the fact that Mr. Raisi was engaged in reprehensible conduct, including repressing his own people for many years as a judge. And that as president, it changes not a whit about our policy, but it's something that we've done many times in the past, going back many administrations and many decades, and we do as a normal course of business.
Well, I don't think it should be a normal course of business. I think it's shocking that this administration would mourn the death of the butcher of Tehran. I don't. He's responsible for death, rape, torture, a sworn enemy of the free world. So I think it's a terrible mistake.
But he didn't. You see, you don't understand. It's Trump. Trump's Hitler.
Mark Levin. You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
I'm not allowed to have a governor sit in for me, Mr. Producer. Did you know that? Or a senator. Well. In any event, we would definitely love our man Ron DeSantis. Don't get me wrong. You know, Nikki Haley's out there. I can't stand Nikki Haley. She's lecturing Trump. You know, there's millions of people who have voted for me, and you need their votes. He knows that. So what she wants to be able to say is, if he lost, she told you so. And if he wins, she helped him. It's very conniving. She stands for literally nothing. But far be it for me to throw a wet blanket. Now, I'm going to start with something completely different. That is you. You, your families, what's happening to you. Many people who had difficulty making ends meet used to rely on fast food restaurants. And I know all the health and dietitian and all the rest of it, but the fact is you need to eat. And I listen to all this stuff about fast food, how bad it is for you. Let me tell you something. Processed foods were created because there was a need. There was a need 100 years ago, 90 years ago, give or take. For what? To feed people in the inner cities. We had massive migration from the south into the big cities. We had massive migration from immigration into our cities. And there wasn't enough fresh food. So what would happen is that people were forced to eat rancid food. There weren't freezers. There weren't ways to keep beef fresh or fish fresh. And so the entrepreneurial system, our market system, capitalism, individuals looked at these various situations and so forth and to develop food. Food that can last on the shelf. Food that can be processed so it won't go rancid or won't go sour. In a period of a few days and a few weeks, people were dying of stomach cancer and other illnesses because of the efforts to keep food fresh or fresh enough. And those efforts were killers. Sawdust was used. Turpentine was used. They didn't know better. They were trying different things. Frozen food was developed. Processed food was developed. Cereal developed. And I go on and on. It was brilliant. It was the sustenance for so many people. And now, of course, it's, we attack all the manufacturers because that's what we do in this country. We attack manufacturers and we enhance and embrace government. I'm not saying it's the healthiest food on the face of the earth, but it fills people's stomachs with relatively, I won't say healthy, but okay food. Now, when you have an economy where the interest rates are through the roof, where the inflation is through the roof, and you have a husband and a wife and 2 or 3 or 4 kids, or a single parent with 2 or 3 kids, it is tough going. I'm sure those folks would love to have fresh beef or fish or chicken or turkey. I'm sure they would love to have fresh vegetables. I'm sure they'd love it. But they can't afford it. Not with Bidenomics. So in the past 50 years or so, under circumstances where you have economic dislocation, people would rely, if not solely, but significantly, to get them through the week, to get them through the month, and part of that would be fast food. Fast food. And there's a wide variety of fast food. chicken, tacos, hamburgers, salads, you name it. You know, we take these things for granted. The vast majority of the world doesn't have food available in any form. This is what capitalism has created. Capitalism, Bernie Sanders, you got it? You old putz? That's right, capitalism. And so we attack it, like we attack other things that the brilliant market system, the American industry has created, like the automobile that uses gasoline. Oh, can't have that. So Wendell Husebo, we're at Breitbart, he points out fast food is no longer healthy for your wallet. Common fast food favorites increased in price under Joe Biden's so-called Bidenomics. You know, you get these figures out on inflation and so forth, but what matters are not those figures generally. What matters is what you're purchasing, that is, what you have to purchase to survive for you and your family. Fast food inflation has a disparate impact across racial and ethnic groups due to different levels of fast food consumption. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, 42.4% of non-Hispanic black adults consume fast food. What I'm talking about. Compared with almost 38% of non-Hispanic white adults, 35.5% of Hispanic adults, almost 31% of Asian adults. So the point is, it is a significant part of the diet, really, of all Americans, especially black and white Americans. So the higher price tag of popular foods, they write, may be creating political problems for Biden. 30% of black men, 11% of black women intend to vote for former President Donald Trump. A Wall Street Journal poll found a dramatic increase from 2020. I don't like these polls because people sit on their ass. They just figure they don't have to vote, or they don't have to be active. They don't have to get out the vote because they figure it's won. I'm telling you now, we've been burned before with this. I'm just raising this point. Popeyes, Taco Bell, Chipotle. Chipotle, you can get a lot of good food. Raised prices by at least 75%, according to the Food Institute. Popeye's regular mashed potatoes and gravy up 134%. Taco Bell's beefy 5-layer burrito up 132%. Wendy's small frosty up 111%. Taco Bell Chalupa Supreme up 110%. Burger King small icy up 101%. Taco Bell cheesy gordita crunch, whatever the hell that is, up 100%. McDonald's McChicken up 199%. Now, there's people in higher income brackets that, well, I don't eat that crap. Well, people eat it, and they have to eat it. And they need to eat it. They want to feed their family. And this is what happens when you have massive government spending, massive government debt, massive government borrowing. I've said it here for 22 damn years. Inflation, inflation, inflation. It is a killer. It destroys the market system. It distorts the value of the dollar. And I love an article I read today. People are saying we're in a recession. That's not technically true. Excuse me. We're in stagflation, and that is technically true. Inflation and interest rates are up. The value of the dollar is down, and pricing of food is up. Stagflation. Prices in nearly 500 California Chipotle restaurants spiked from 6% to 7% during just the first week of April. Chick-fil-A raised prices by 10.6% between mid-February and mid-April. Starbucks by 7.8%. Shake Shack by 7.7%. Biden blames inflation on Trump, falsely claiming twice in May that it was 9% when he took office. We know that's a lie. Then he blames corporate greed. There's corporate greed going on out there, and it's got to be dealt with. So he blamed the businesses that are trying desperately to cope with the economic conditions he created, with the minimum wage conditions that he and others have created, with the supply chain problems that he has created. Fast food is fast food because it's quick and cheap. It's no longer cheap. And it's hurting the bottom line for fast food restaurants. They don't want prices to go up. They sell volume. Volume. Biden's top economic priorities are fighting inflation and lowering costs for the American people, says White House Press Deputy Secretary Andrew Bates. This guy is a complete fraud, phony, constantly spitting out the big lie. Standing up to corporate price gouging is at the core of that fight. So they resort to the Marxist class warfare propaganda. How come the corporations didn't do this 3 years ago, 4 years ago? The corporations were founded on the 15-cent hamburger. Remember that, Mr. Producer? 15-cent hamburger. Price is cheap. It was on quantity, sales, the amount of sales. Remember those McDonald's signs? 1 billion hamburgers, then 10 billion, now so many billions. They can't even put them on the sign. That's what they're about. They're not about gourmet. They're not about a 5-meal, three-meal dinner. They're not about any of that stuff. It's get your meal, get it quickly, and go. Restaurants are struggling. Restaurants are struggling to attract customers. Eating out is now very, very expensive. Only 28% of voters said Biden's economy helped their financial situation. 71% economic conditions are negative. 80% said soaring prices are one of their biggest challenges. He talks about growing the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. He's destroying the economy, which means it's the middle in and the bottom down. And he's doing it top down. There's no bigger monopoly than the federal government. None. And unlike private corporations, they can actually pass the laws and issue the regulations that control the market. Now, this is important. This is important. While people are suffering, lower class, upper lower class, lower middle class, whatever Marxist regime you want to consider. Under Biden, the wealthy are doing beautifully. What do you mean, Mark? Stock market's way up? Way up. And he's desperate to get two voters. The Hitler Youth and the Islamists, and the Marxists, of course, and rich white kids that go to college. What did Joe Biden do today? The Associated Press. The Biden administration is canceling student loans for another 160,000 borrowers through a combination of existing programs. They're bragging that it amounts to about $35,000 per student borrower. He's handing out $35,000 checks like they're candy to those who can most afford to pay their debt, or even if they can't, are responsible, who voluntarily, of their own free will, took it out in the first place. And the dirty little secret is when you take out a student loan, you don't actually have to spend it on college. People spend it on cars, they spend it on rent, they spend it on clothes and jewelry. The list of horribles is infinite. But the point is, he is destroying the ability of the people on the lower part of the ladder, the lowest rung of the ladder, to walk up that ladder, while he is subsidizing people who took out loans, and he's handing them a $35,000 check. And in addition, in defiance of a United States Supreme Court ruling that says he doesn't have the power to do it, he did it again today. Today. And he's handing out Obamacare to DACA, illegal immigrants. Again, without any statutory authority. Obamacare. Student loan forgiveness. Well, you're fighting to pay for a damn hamburger. Think about it. Well, he goes out and he talks about how he stands for the little guy. He stands on the little guy.
Mark Levin. great one makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
You know, folks, I think for myself. Doesn't get me in trouble. It just doesn't get me invited to many places, Mr. Producer. Have you noticed that? But it's fine. I don't want to be invited to many places. So Nikki Haley barely endorsed Donald Trump. She said she's going to vote for him. Okay, that's her endorsement. But he needs to reach out to her supporters. And so Nikki Haley's very crafty, ladies and gentlemen. She doesn't do anything without plotting and scheming. She wants to just say she's going to vote for Trump, or it would have been the kiss of death. But she's positioned herself now that if Trump wins, of course, it'll be the Haley supporters that did it. If Trump loses, well, he didn't reach out enough, you see, to the Haley supporters. So she'll have it both ways. I've been around too long to be fooled by this crap. Too long. Her endorsement means nothing because it's not an endorsement. She said she will vote for Donald Trump. I don't care what the media say. I don't care what anybody else says. She said she will vote for Donald Trump. She didn't say that because she actually supports Donald Trump. She said that because she's looking 4 years down the road. That's why she said it. Anyway, so be it. And they're pointing out, she got 5-6% of the vote in Kentucky and 17% of the vote here. So what? I don't understand. You still have states where voting's taking place and Republican primaries where Democrats and others can cross over, but so what? When it's the choice between Trump and Biden, I think real Republicans will vote for Trump. Not just MAGA. And what is this MAGA? Make America Great Again. That's us, conservatives. Red-blooded Americans. Bill Maloogian. This guy's great. They're a real reporter. This guy's great. So there he is on the border, unlike anybody at CNN, right? Fake tap out. Anybody at MSLSD. You'll never see the Scarboroughs on the border. No. Bill Maloogian's on the border. He's a reporter. And he's at Jacumba, California. Is that how you pronounce it, Mr. Producer? Jacumba. Excuse me, I'm not up to Jacumba, California, but nonetheless. And he asks them, and they're all men. They're all men. They're all military-age men. The following. Cut 17, nice and loud, go.
Where are you guys from? What country?
Pakistan.
Pakistan.
India.
India. Where are you from?
Turkey.
Turkey?
Yeah.
Turkey. Okay.
India.
India. Where are you guys from?
Turkey.
Turkey. Turkey? Where are you guys from?
China.
China.
Ecuador.
Ecuador? Where are you guys from?
India.
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 India. India.
India. Sagar Baba.
India. India.
India.
India.
India.
India.
India.
India.
Yes. India.
India. All India?
India.
India. Iran.
Iran.
You're all from Iran. Why'd you come?
No freedom.
No freedom?
Yes, in Iran. Iran is a dangerous country. No freedom for speak, for writing, for singing, for thinking.
What happened to the Mexican immigrants who are going to pick all of our lettuce, according to John McCain, Mr. Producer? Doing jobs that Americans won't do. Whatever happened to those folks? This is the destruction of America. Now, some of these people could be the next, Einstein or whatever. It doesn't matter. Most of them aren't. I'm not even putting them down. I'm just stating a fact. Neil Cavuto asks Mayorkas, the DHS secretary yesterday, is America safer on the border under Biden than before the 9/11 attacks? Simple question. Great question by Cavuto. Cut 18, go.
Are we safer now than we were before 9/11?
I would say three things, Anil. One, I'm incredibly proud of the men and women of the United States Border Patrol that risk their lives every day
I'm sure
keep
you are,
Americans
but are we safer?
safe and
are
secure.
We safer
Number
now?
one. Number two.
By the way, most of them hate your guts, Mr. Secretary. Go ahead.
And vetting capabilities are stronger than they ever have been. And three, the reality is, Neil, that we, and not just the United States alone, but Western countries are in a heightened threat environment, especially after the October 7th.
That's enough. He doesn't answer him. Doesn't answer him. Because the answer is no, as Neil obviously knows. The answer is no. This man was impeached. There was no trial. Schumer's covering. I want Americans to understand what's going on with our country here. The man was impeached, properly so, for breaking immigration law and violating his oath and the Constitution. The House did its job, and they laid it out beautifully. We've talked about it. I read from it here and on Fox and on Blaze. It goes to the Senate, and they won't even hold a trial. They just dismiss it. That's never been done in American history before. That's not how it's supposed to work. The Constitution talks about a trial, not a dismissal, a trial. They didn't want a trial. Why? Because they didn't want to highlight what's going on the border. Now, tomorrow, Schumer's bringing up the failed bipartisan bill because 3 Republicans are stupid, like McConnell and that jerk from Oklahoma, I forget his name, and maybe one other moron. They're taken to the cleaners. Taken to the cleaners. Taken to the cleaners. And they're going to bring it up again to show it's the Republicans who really don't want to secure the border. Really? Well, listen to Jackie Heinrich with Jean-Pierre at the White House today. Cut 19, go.
The president has the authority to do something about this unilaterally. Congress is in a divided government right now. Why isn't he doing anything?
Why should he have to do it unilaterally? Why should we do it in a legislative?
Because he undid it unilaterally, you schmuck. That's why. And that bill doesn't do a damn thing. And this is what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. They're playing with your lives. They're playing with your communities. They're playing with our resources. They're playing with us. It's a shadow game. It's a mirror game. That's all it is. Go ahead.
And let's not forget that negotiated
action before to undo some of.
Wait. So you're right. He took many executive actions before. But in order to deal with what's happening at the border, in order to deal with a broken immigration system,
it's not a broken immigration system. You broke the system by going around it. The system would work. We have 100 years of laws. Painstakingly debated, negotiated, voted on, signed by former presidents of both parties. And he shredded them like he does the Constitution on student loans. Just blew them off. Now, we need this bipartisan legislation. This bipartisan legislation where you had no House members and you had a couple of Republican senators who were schmucks, like McConnell, is a disaster. It enshrines the high numbers. And the money for the border is minuscule. It doesn't go to border control. And the money's not even available till 2028. Ooh. You need law, she says. You need law. So Biden breaks the law, but now you need law. I don't know, folks.
Mark Levin. We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
We have a breach at Quantico, FBI/Marine training facility in Virginia. We have special forces, ops soldiers, who are now being stalked in North Carolina, confronting two Chechens who didn't have any ID with them. We have a power grid in North Carolina that was shot up. 40,000 people went offline, again, by immigrants. This is just a tiny taste of what's going to happen in this country. A tiny taste. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Even long after Biden's gone, long after that whole crowd is gone, the implications, the consequences for what these people have done to our immigration system, that is the Biden regime, to our sovereignty, to our ability to find out who's coming, has been completely destroyed. In a world full of terrorists, in a world full of enemies, now they're here. Criminals, terrorists, spies, they're here. And I want you to keep something in mind. China is going to invade Taiwan. Taiwan is not being provided with the armaments that it needs to protect itself. China's navy is larger than ours. Its maritime forces is 50 times larger than ours. And that's why Xi is sending single, military-age, communist Chinese individuals into our country. At the same time, Russia is way ahead of everybody in nuclearizing space. And they've got killer satellites up there, as does China, and we have nothing. They knock out our satellites, they knock out our GPS system, not just for us, we the people, but for our military. They're blinded. We're ready for none of it. None of it. There's a breaking story on Fox News. I've got a lot of breaking stories here this evening. A purportedly never-before-seen Department of Defense memo from the Obama era appears to indicate the federal government already may have had original copies of the documents seized at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in 2022, raising serious questions about the pretext for the raid. Fox News Digital has exclusively learned. America First Legal released today what it says is a newly unearthed memo from the Obama administration, Department of Defense, confirming the government may have already had originals of the alleged classified documents involved in Special Counsel Jack Smith's sham prosecution against President Trump, says the group. The document is titled Memorandum of Understanding entered into by Presidential Information Technology Community Entities. It's from 2015 and followed in October 2014 Russian breach of the executive office of the president's network. That would be Obama. Then President Barack Obama took executive action to create the Presidential Information Technology Community, PITC, to better protect the executive branch from such attacks, according to the group. Now, the PITC, which includes representatives from federal agencies such as Defense and Homeland Security, effectively established the president controls information he receives through the PITC network. The executive action was made public at the time, but the group said it obtained a never-before-seen memo confirming that the Defense Department has been, quote, operating and maintaining the information resources and information systems provided to the President, Vice President, and Executive Office of the President. Their point is, this has all been digitized. This group of various agencies had the very information, already had the information that they sent a SWAT team, allegedly, to gather. The memo could mean that the federal government has stored and retained Executive Office of the President documents, including a substantial amount, if not all, President Trump's classified documents, they said. What America First Legal has uncovered after months of investigative work paints an unfortunate picture of the rule of law in Washington. A former president of the United States, the most democratically accountable officer under our Constitution, was subject to a politicized referral concocted by the Biden White House that led to an armed FBI raid of his home, where his wife and youngest child live, and is now subject to prosecution, said the group. And to now realize the Biden administration could have avoided an illegal referral process to recover records the government already possessed, that it could have used normal means to ensure that the records of the former president should be housed in his presidential library, not yet built because of the hordes of investigations aimed at silencing him, were subject to a temporary hold for purposes of archives review, yet didn't, speaks loudly to America. The law protects only those who follow the norms of one party. And it goes on. And this is important in another sense. Julie Kelly came on this program after seeing documents that were released in the case in Florida. And she accurately reported that the memo, the directive that was given to FBI SWAT, did include the possible use of deadly force. The Attorney General of the United States today and others are calling this a conspiracy theory that President Trump could have been harmed if he'd been there. And there were reports that said they wouldn't have used deadly force anyway because the Secret Service was there. Now, I addressed this, and I want to underscore it again. We have Merrick Garland, who came out of his, the bathroom, and finally spoke. Cut 8, Mr. Producer, go.
Most of us got a solicitation email this morning from the former President of the United States saying that the Justice Department had authorization to kill him during the Mar-a-Lago raid. First, can you give us some clarification on that particular point that he's making and whether or not deadly force is authorized in other interventions, including...
That's very interesting how the reporter asked this question, isn't it? Snarky little bastard. Go ahead.
Mr. Biden's residence and office. And the second question is...
Can I do one at a time? Okay. On that one, that allegation is false, and it is extremely dangerous. The document that is being referred to in the allegation is the Justice Department standard policy limiting the use of force. As the FBI advises, it is part of the standard operations plan for searches, and in fact, it was even used in the consensual search of President Biden's home.
Let's stop. The consensual search of Biden's home. There was no consensual search at Mar-a-Lago. You sent a SWAT team. Now, I am perplexed as a former Department of Justice official. You would use your standard form, your standard operating procedure to send heavily armed FBI SWAT team to Mar-a-Lago with standard orders. And those standard orders apparently include when to use deadly force. Why would you use a standard order when you're sending a heavily armed SWAT team to Mar-a-Lago? This isn't a conspiracy question. I'm not saying they went there to assassinate. No, I don't believe that. That's not my point. My point is, look how irresponsible and dangerous this was. Then they say, well, the Secret Service was given a heads up. More reason to take your standard form because the Secret Service is involved, Mar-a-Lago is involved, the family of a former president or a president who could have returned was involved. People at the club, perhaps, are involved, even though it's 6 a.m. Employees. This was reckless. That's the point. There was no need for an FBI SWAT team, period. There was no need for a criminal warrant of any kind, period. It could have been pursued civilly. That's why there was disagreement within the FBI at the lower ranks, raising questions about doing this. And yet they pressed forward, and Garland signed off on it. They use a standard form to send a SWAT team to the former president's home where the Secret Service is present. You realize how irresponsible that was? You sent it to Biden's home. It was consensual. What does that have to do with anything? It was consensual. The reason they sent the SWAT team at 6 a.m. under cover of dark was to surprise the people who were there. They didn't want them to touch anything. They got a secret warrant. The SWAT team acted in secret. It acted at 6 a.m. and under the cover of dark with a standard order. Even though the Secret Service is there, and even though they said they spoke to the Secret Service. So why did you have to conduct yourself this way if you spoke to the Secret Service? And if you didn't speak to the Secret Service, further endangering everybody on the scene. This was the most irresponsible, outrageous FBI SWAT act ever. Ever. And 100% unnecessary. 100% unnecessary. Let me give you an example. Secret Service works for the Department of Homeland Security. The Attorney General could have picked up the phone if this is what they wanted to do. I think the whole damn thing's outrageous. Called the Secretary of DHS and said, look, I want your Secret Service to go collect those boxes. We have a warrant. We have a warrant that allows the Secret Service to do that. So the Secret Service that are there pick up the boxes and remove. I don't think they should have done any of that. But if you're going to do it, Mr. Producer, wouldn't that be the smart thing to do? What are you sending armed FBI agents and SWAT with a standard order in the cover of dark at 6 a.m. in the morning to the former president's home? The hell is that all about? That's the point. That's the damn point. And so important were these documents. So crucial. All the leaks to the New York Slimes. All the lies that they regurgitate. Oh, nuclear secret. Yeah, right, sure. And they get the documents. And now we know they mishandled them. What's the chain of custody? We don't know. Why did they change the covers? We don't know. Why were the documents out of order? We don't know. How do we know anything's missing? They mishandled classified information, which could mean it was spoiled, the spoliation, we call it. It matters what order the documents are in. It matters what covers are on the documents. It matters whose fingerprints are on the documents. It all matters when you're in a criminal case that's based on the documents. But even more, mishandling classified information. Where did they put it? How did they handle it? Because, Mr. Producer, if you're not the president or former president of the United States, mishandling classified information, right? Doesn't that violate the Espionage Act? Ooh. So many questions.